to select for this picture. We've got it all drawn up, just about ready to go. It's looking a little cartoonish at the moment, but that's all we need to have in place for now. And now it's time to choose some colours. So I have got a little box here. This is just a little empty box and some paper towel. So I like to sit my colours in there so I can have my palette nearby, and then that way you don't forget what you used. So the best way I find, if you're doing this to colour match basically, is to kind of go to your palette and kind of hover the pastels over your picture and see what matches and what doesn't. So I can see there's a bit of orange in there, but not a lot to keep this one in my hand. So I'm going to go and look for other colours that might work for me. The other important thing to note is that we want to make sure we stay in tone. So you want to make sure you've got a nice range of darks and lights and mids. So this pussycat is kind of a lot of warm grey in here. And if you have pencils, by all means, use those. Your pencils will come in very handy towards the end, because that's where you can start to use those to get some nice fur happening. So I'm just looking at my greys. I've got what looks like an apricot kind of colour there, and a dark grey and a lighter grey. What else have I got? I want to add a bit of warmth, so brown. There's probably a bit of brown in that one, so I'm going to use this brown. It's a dark brown. I need one more mid. Mids are important, even though, when you go to buy pastels in the shop, I'm just so drawn to all the brights and all the darks, and I keep forgetting to get the mids. But the mids are what support everything else. So it's really important to try and have a nice range of a few mid colours in each painting, because that's what your foundation is. And then the lights and the darks are the features. But you've still got to have those foundation colours to let everything else work really well. So let's see what I've got in here. It's like a pinky colour. My pastels get very dirty, so sometimes it's hard to see what colour they really are. Don't mind that, actually. Could be quite nice in there. Could try it anyway and see. And then looking at the brown on the nose, I could probably use this brown that I've already got with a combination of the light apricot colour to get a bit of a highlight in there. And then, of course, so if that's all my mids, basically, in order of tone. So to find the tone, I'm just squinting at this selection of colours now. If you squint, you can see in black and white kind of, and then you can kind of put them in order of tone. Those two greys are probably the same. They're very similar. Might need one slightly darker than that. Better. So what I'm doing is trying to get a nice range from light down to dark in about 4 or 5 colours. And then I'm going to choose my darkest, which is usually blue violet, if I can find one. Never seem to have one. Don't know why. Probably use them too much. So I'll grab this. It might be a blue violet. It's hard to tell. No, it's too purple. There's one. There we go. That's beautiful. It's a nice and dark. So that's my darkest. And then we want the lightest. So of course, there's a lot of white in here, and that will be our final highlights for white. But you know me, I like to save white for last. So I have got a white there, even though it doesn't look like it because it's all grubby. But that'll be my white for my final touches of the fur and hair. The other light colour, I might pop a bit of blue in there, I think. So pale blue would be really nice, just to give it a little bit of something a bit more interesting. So let me find a pale blue. Trying to find a piece that's not too chunky. I hate breaking them. There's a pale blue. So something like that, a little bit of a sky blue kind of colour. So that's pretty much my palette. Now we probably need to, if you want to, you don't always have to do this, but I don't mind testing my colours, maybe on another bit of spare paper you've got lying around. I've got lots of paper lying around because there's a million and one painting that we've done. So I'm just going to use this paper because it's a similar colour to the one we're working on. Hot cross buns. So if I pop a bit of these, just have a little test. See what you think when you put these colours together. What's really nice about this picture is that it's an orange base, and orange and blue are really lovely together. And a nice complementary kind of combination. So what I'm doing is just zhooshing some of this colour around to see how that might look together. Just push it around and get put some on top of the other just to see what happens. And I think that's a nice, it's sort of soft and lovely combination. So I don't want something that's too strong or too bright. This is a lovely soft cat, and so that's the feeling we want to try and keep if we can. If you just want to pat it and cuddle it. That's a lovely little bit of dark grey, so that'll be nice in the dark bit. Got this brown as well, so I might use those, one or both of those for the dark. That's quite nice. And then my blue violet, so that'll be for my dark bits inside the eye and the nose, etc. So I think that's quite a lovely little combination, a nice little palette. This pinky colour I picked up, it's a bit hard. So I pressed pretty hard to make that work, but this is different paper as well. It's also similar to my background colour, which is probably why I grabbed it. Similar tone. Yeah, it's quite nice on that. So I'm going to hang on to that. So basically, that's my little palette. Oh, I forgot the eye. The eye. It's a lovely little green colour, isn't it? Beautiful. A bit of turquoise, I guess. Maybe a bit of that sort of turquoise colour with some of the apricot in it. Might need a little bit of more blue. More blue. Have a bit of a play with that. See what colours you can kind of push around together to make that the eye colour. So I've used a blue. This is phthalo blue. It's the T. I don't know what the T means. Well, but the colours all kind of, they have the same name. So this is called phthalo blue, right? Now, phthalo blue comes in about 4 different shades. So this is one of the middle ones. Your darkest phthalo blue is really, really dark, like your phthalo green. But this is a mid-range one. So if you ever get confused, they've got a little letter on them. There's a T and a V and a T and something else. And that tells you the quantities of dark and light and stuff that's mixed in with that base colour, base phthalo blue. And you'll find the same thing will be in your blue violets. You'll be able to get a lighter blue violet than the darkest one that we use. So, and they've all got those little codes on them, but I can't remember what they mean. It's written down here somewhere. So that's I'm just playing with the eye colour. Quite like that. And then if I pop a bit of the apricot in, that's going to give me that lovely little light area around the edge of it. And possibly might have to go for something a bit yellower, perhaps. Don't know yet. See how we go. I'm happy to kind of wait and see what happens, but I think that there is a pretty nice little combination of blues and greens to use for that. And then once we put the dark purple in, you might even have to go to black for that, depending on whether the blue violet looks and feels dark enough or not. So that's pretty much the little colour range I've got ready to go. And as I said, paper towel's good because you can wipe it on there and give it a clean. It's also good if you can remember to have another piece of it in your hand, and then you can just sort of keep wiping your pastels in between marks if you don't want to have dirty pastels and put them back down on the paper if they're marked or they've picked up the other colours underneath. Always handy to have a stick of charcoal hanging around too. That's good for doing some fine lines and detail perhaps. I'm feeling like this is a bit out of whack actually. Maybe it's not. Probably just a visual thing. It just looks so weird at the moment. 3.5 by 3. 7. Yeah, it's about right. Okay, I'm just going to trust my grid. When in doubt, trust the grid. Okay, so I'm going to go and get a cuppa, and I'll come back in about 10 minutes if that's all right. So it's 10:28 now. So what if we come back at 10:35-ish? So I'll see you back here then, and then we'll get stuck into colouring in. All right, won't be long. All right, so welcome back. I'm assuming everyone's still here. So I'm going to keep trucking on. As I said earlier, if you want to ask any questions or anything, please do. I'm all up to that. It's very cool. And we've got our very bad drawing ready to fill in with some colour. So hopefully you've all got some colours sorted out. I do try to keep them in order from light to dark, but then I forget and they just get all messed up. But we'll start there anyway and see how we go. I've also got my iPad nearby here with my picture on a screen so I can see that more clearly and I can zoom in on it if I need to. All right, so let's start with some darks and lights. We're going to block those in first. That will give us a really nice way to map out what's going on here. So I'm going to use my blue violet. That's my darkest pastel that I've chosen from my palette. We're not going to fill the background in at this stage. So what I want to do is leave that unpainted. If you have a colour that you don't like and you do want to fill that in, by all means, feel free to do that. There's no reason you can't. But one of the great things about this pastel paper is that you can get it in different colours. And so you can actually choose to work on a dark paper and not have to worry about, changing the colours of the background. So we're just going to focus on the cat today, but feel free to fill things in later if you want to. So let's study this. And again, what I'm going to do is just very lightly block in where I can see some shadow. So we talked about that earlier when we did it up in charcoal. And the shadow is under the chin. So I've got a little bit of shadow there. And then I've got a little bit of shadow on the right-hand side of the nose. So kind of the top, there's a little bit of light on the very top of it. But there's a shadow running around down the side of the nose. That's going to help give the turn to the face. We've also got dark in around the eye. What I'm doing is I'm just holding my little stick of pastel on the paper flat and just rubbing it around very lightly. What we're trying to do is not get too dark yet. Okay, so the idea is not to get too much dark down or too much pastel anywhere at this stage. We're just patching it in very lightly. And the reason we do that is so that we've got a lot of space to keep adding colour as we go. If you put too much pastel down at the beginning of your painting, you'll find you can't get more on towards the end, and that's when it gets really frustrating because you can't get enough colour down on the paper. And then you either got to use some fixative to seal it so that you can then start again and keep building your layers, or you need to wash some of it off. So that's why I just go very lightly at first when I'm first putting colour down, because I want to leave enough space, I guess, to add more later. So really just blocking in where I can see some shadow or dark. So that's kind of on the side of the face here, under the chin, down through there. There's a tiny bit just inside the cheeks. I know it's not super dark, but I just want to get a little bit of tone into these spots so that when we pop colour over the top, you'll be able to see some of the shadow underneath. And that little ear in the background, that's kind of wanders off into the background. It's very soft and blurred, so we don't want to put too much emphasis on that. So we can darken that off a little bit and push it away. So things that are further away are usually soft and blurred, and then things that are closer will be sharper and often more defined, either super dark or super bright. Okay, so that's roughly, looks terrible, doesn't it? That's roughly kind of what we want to be doing. And I think the eye makes it look worse because it's just so dark and drawn in more so than anything else at this point. Okay, now let's mark in some of the lights, but don't use your white. Pick up that lovely little apricot colour that we picked up before. So, or something similar. You might have a very pale blue if you don't want to use your browns. You might want to go for yellow or something like that. Yellow might be warm actually. A lovely cream might be a little bit warmer than this one. I'm going to have a crack at this first though and see how I feel. The nice thing about this is you can actually change your mind. So if I put some of this down, for instance, where I can see the lighter colour first, so I can see light just in here above the eye. There's a tiny bit back there, but it's very soft. And then, of course, we've got the cheek. So we're not using white until the end, and we're only going to use white on things like whiskers that are really white. Everything else that's light will be this light colour that we've chosen that's not quite white. So I like to save white for last because then you've still got somewhere to go. You know, you can still go lighter than what you've already got. If you put white down now, you can't go lighter than white. So there's nowhere else to go. So I'm just leaving space for myself, I guess. And so back to changing your mind. If I decide I don't like this colour, if I think it might not be bright enough or light enough, I can change it. I can pick up a cream or a yellow or something else if I get the urge. So what I'm doing now is just kind of, again, marking lightly in where I can see the light bits. And so I don't want to press too hard. I don't want to fill the tooth of the paper too much because I need to be able to get a lot more pastel down on here. And I'm still using the little stick on its side, literally lying it down on the page like that and just pulling it across so that it's a nice loose mark and pulling it in the direction that the fur goes, okay? So that's an important thing to know when you're doing textured things like this, especially something with fur. You've got to look at the direction of the hair or whatever it is that you're doing and pull the pastel around in that direction. It's the same as if you were using a paintbrush and you would brush in the direction of the hair or the grass or whatever it is you're doing. So it's the same sort of theory. So that's already starting to look a little bit better now because I can see now where the darks and the lights are and how this is going to pan out basically. All right. So again, the eye is going to be looking a bit odd until we get stuck into that. But for now, we're just going to mark in where we see the light and the dark. On the very bridge of the nose, I'm just putting a finer line down on the bridge of the nose there because I can see on the very edge of the nose is catching the light, and then as it turns in towards us, it gets a little darker. So if I pop a bit of light there like that now, and to get a sharper edge, I just use the edge of my pastel. This is a lovely little square one. If you have round ones, you can still find a sharp edge on the end, on the tip usually. This one's a bit worn. And if you can't, then just break a stick and you'll get a really nice sharp edge to use. But most of my small bits like this was a round one. You'll find an edge somewhere, usually. So, and failing that, if you have pencils, then pencils are your friend as well. So in this instance, this is not the right color, but I could actually use a pencil to get a much more precise mark. So your pencils are great for doing fur and fine lines and sharp edges like this. I know Leslie will be using hers because she's got a great set of pencils and she does a lot of animals, so she'll be well used to dancing between the pastels and the pencils. And you can use them both together. It's very cool. So don't feel like you can't have one without the other. You can mix them all up. And yeah, enjoy the benefits of both things. I also have pencils, but I tend to forget about them. I tend not to use them too much because sometimes I've just got a pastel in my hand, so I'll try and make that work. But yeah, pencils are great. And if you can only manage to get one pencil, then just make sure you get something that's in a mid-tone. So like this color that I picked up before, it's a nice mid-tone. It'll show up on a white paper or a dark paper. The only paper that wouldn't show on that would be the same color as that. But generally something in this color is a really good option if you can only get one. And it's a good all-rounder then, just for drawing up your pictures and so forth. But as I said, pencils are awesome for fur and hair and things like that. Okay, so this is starting to kind of look a little bit more like I want it to now. And hopefully yours is too. So I've put quite a lot of light down. I've put quite a lot of dark down. But the reason for that is now we can start building it up. We can start kind of playing around with mid-tones and layering some colour. So for instance, even though I've put dark in this dark area, it's not that dark in the picture, but now I can kind of go over it with my grey, which is mid to dark colour, and sort of build up the tone with that. So it's just about choosing colours that represent different tones. So that's a bit dull and boring, but I can always brighten it up afterwards. So now I'm kind of looking at the picture and I'm looking for the same tone as that on the nose. And it is kind of a greyish tone, isn't it? They've still got that lovely little light right on the edge of the nose because it's catching the light off to the left there. But now I'm going to just wander around with this grey in my hand and pop it down where I can see a similar or same sort of colour or tone. Now, you've got to look pretty carefully. So, you know, you really need to study your picture and notice the colours and the lights and the dark more so than, you know, the detail at this stage. We'll get into that after. But what I'm trying to do is just kind of scratch around in here and get some of that same greyish colour or tone where I can see it. This is when we start to build the form. This is where it's really important to get those tones in the right place. Now, it wouldn't matter if I was using all purples or blues or whatever. It doesn't matter what colours you use as long as you know you've got enough variation in your tone. So we could technically do this in any colour you want. But to make it work, you need your lights and your darks. Okay, so I'm just looking at the picture and patching this in where I can see all those little bits of grey. I'm going to pop a bit into that ear that's far away over there because I want that to wander off in the distance. Now, if I had a pastel the same colour as my paper, that would be ideal. Pretty sure I haven't, but you never know your luck. So these papers you can actually get in pastel. No, that one's too pink. But something like that. This one's Bordeaux. I said that before, didn't I? This is a similar colour to the paper. And so I could literally just see, I've already picked up another naughty colour that I didn't have. I could literally just pop that around the ear here at the back and sort of push that in to the background. So just let it kind of blend off. See how that softened the edge a little bit? So it kind of just wanders off into the background because I don't want that to feature. It's not closest to us. It probably should be a little bit lighter than that if I compare it to my picture and the colour of the background. So I could use my lighter grey just to lighten it up, but just keep it super soft because we don't want to put too much emphasis on that. I mean, the ear's still there. It does have an ear, and it's still the same kind of colours and things as the rest of the face, but I'm just putting it in really softly. See how that's really soft? So what I used was a light grey and then that apricot colour, which was my pretend white or my lightest at the moment, because I can see that back there as well. It's probably a bit too bright at the moment. Okay. But you can push it in and dab it in and soften it off. That's the lovely thing about these. Just soften them off and let that wander off into the background. It doesn't have to be a major feature. It's just got to support everything else. It's got to make sense, hasn't it? If it didn't have an ear there, that would look a bit weird. So it's still got to have an ear. We just don't have to feature it. All right. So now I've got some of this colour on. What I'm going to, I know I said I wasn't going to blend, but I just want to gently push some of this in because that way it's going to give me some more tooth to add more texture later. So I'm not pushing very hard. I'm just going to go really softly. And that's going to sort of make everything go kind of grey and muddy, which is a really nice base because then we can build on that and start getting some of this fur built up onto the surface. So we're putting a foundation down. We've just built the foundation and then we're going to push this in so that we can add more to it. If at this stage, and it's probably a good idea, you want to take out the outline of your cat, because what we want to do at the end is kind of push some of this over the edge of the cat so that we're getting that lovely soft furry feeling around the edges. See how I just did that? But if you've got a black outline or a pencil line there, it's going to be a bit harder to cover. So if you want to now, just grab your eraser and take some of that off so that it doesn't disturb you later. Because now you've got your basic shape in there, we can find our way around it. And you can even start removing some of the grid as well, although sometimes it's good to leave that there just to refer back to if you're trying to figure out where something should be, if you lose your way a little bit. But if you, remove some of that. Well, now I'll put my light colour all through my paper. That's clever. And so this is where you get into trouble when you don't fill the background in, because then you've got to get all the pastel off that you accidentally put on. Anyway, I'll worry about that later. It does come off. You just got to spend a bit of time dabbing and mucking around. So yeah, just take out some of those sharp edges if you have any, because then that's going to give you some freedom for softer edges as we move forward. I think this might work out okay. When you start doing something and you think, oh my goodness, this is going to be a bit terrible, it'll be all right. They've all got to have an ugly stage, haven't they? You've got to start somewhere. And plus we can add more lights at the end, so that's always a bonus. I love that part. It's the part I look forward to most, is putting the light in at the end. And then it just all kind of comes together and pops. It's really exciting. All right, so literally still rubbing some of this colour in. Now I know your lights are going to get dirty and your darks will get light and all that stuff. It doesn't matter. As long as you've got a little bit of tone in the right places, it's a good guide and a really good foundation. And again, just pull the pastel around in the direction of the hair. So have a look at which way the hair is growing or going. and pull it in that direction. So for instance, around the eye, it's sort of all coming out from the eye, isn't it? And then up on the top of the head, it's kind of going up and across this different directions. So you can kind of pull that around in those directions. Around above the eye, it's coming out from the eye again. So I've literally just put my finger down on the edge of the eye and pulled the pastel out away from the eye so that you try and get that lovely soft furry effect. And I'm going to pull the skin around on the little cheeks. Got to do that little cheek far left there, that nice bright one that's catching the light. In the process, I've smudged my nose and forgot to light up that other bit there. But that's okay, because this is just the foundation, just the beginning. I'm not a precision person, so you've probably worked that out by now. It's all on a bit of a wing and a prayer, really. Best way to travel. Okay, and then as you go around the edges, if you've rubbed out your lines now, you can start to soften them off a little bit. Just go gently, gently outside the edges, just to get that lovely, soft, blurry, furry effect. So that there's no sharp lines, because this guy's all soft and fluffy, isn't it? There we go. And now I want to come back and pop that light. I forgot to put this bit of light in under the mouth. So I've got a nice little bit of light in there. And then I can lighten up my cheek again. Remember, if you haven't used white, you can always come back and lighten that up later. That's the best bit. I'm just going to push that in a bit. Now, once we've pushed in this first layer, we're going to not push in any more fur. And we'll start working on the surface and just letting everything kind of sit there and do its own thing. And that's the nice thing, isn't it? The pastels do that really beautifully. Give us this beautiful texture. I'm just dabbing around, getting this kind of all in place, ready for the next bit. You might want to tidy up some edges, or, check the drawing. Always check the drawing, checking with your grid, making sure your lines are heading in the right direction. Your nose isn't too high or too big. You've got the angle of your nose right. So you want to make sure you've got that, that almost vertical line on the nose on the left side, and then that lovely little twist as it comes around into the nostril. So that's a definite shape, isn't it? And even if I'm going to just draw that back in now with my charcoal, because you do lose your shapes. And the little top of the nose, it kind of pops out, doesn't it? So it sits up against the background before the cheek part interrupts it. So just noticing those little things. And yeah, the charcoal's awesome for drawing things back in if you lose your way a little bit. Okay. So the first thing I think we should work on is the eye, because it's sitting inside the head, basically, and all the fur's around it. So we need to get into the eye and get that kind of done, and then we can work out from there, because it's further back, basically. So let's have a look at the white of the eye. I can see it, again, it's not really white, is it? Nothing's ever really white. So what I'm going to do is use this apricot colour. That's my light that I used earlier. Now, if you have a different light or you see something else in there, go for it. You don't have to do what I do. You might have a pale blue or something like that you feel is a better option for that. But study it, see what you can see. What colours can you see in there? So what I'm trying to do is get that little bit of the white in there. It's actually a bit darker than what I've made it. So I'm going to put a bit of blue in there, see what happens. So this is the light blue that I picked up a bit earlier, that we'll use in the fur as well, because I like to use one colour in a couple of places. So that's kind of graded off a little bit, which is nice, because the white of the eye is not really that white. It just looks white compared to everything else around it. Okay, so I've got to get that bit in. There's also, can you see the black right on the very edge between the fur and the eyeball or the eye? So that's just shadow, or, you know, a bit around the eye. I'm doing this with charcoal because I can get a finer line with charcoal. And I can also soften it off with my fingers and just kind of soften those edges. So you put the pad of your finger where you drew the charcoal, and then if you pull it in towards the eye, it kind of softens the edge, but it starts to create a little bit of a shadow as well. So it starts to look kind of round or solid. Okay, so that's my eyeball. Just having another look. Do I need to make it a different color? Is it light enough? Is it dark enough? What's my tone here? It's all about the tone, isn't it? Comparing the picture. So it's slightly lighter, just very slightly lighter. I'm going to make it brighter so you can see what I'm talking about, but down through there, you see how it's a little tiny bit lighter than either side. So on the inside of the eye here, the ball itself is a little darker, and then when it is next to the coloured bit, it's also a bit darker. But there's a little bit of light just there, and what that does is it makes it turn, so it gives it the roundness. So what I've done is I've put that in with my apricot, and now I'm just dabbing it in with my finger because it's not really obvious. It's very, very subtle, but it's just enough to give us a bit of roundness into the eye socket bit. I keep forgetting what they're called. Eyeball bit. Okay, so now I've got that in there. I'm just checking my shape. I feel like it needs to come more across here. And then down a little rounder. The cat's eyes are interesting, aren't they? They're really quite big and roundish, but because they've got the horizontal pupil, we always think that they're more, I don't know, angular, I suppose, than they really are. So I'm just redrawing all of that because I want to make sure I get my angles right. And again, I'm using charcoal to do that. Okay. And then we can get stuck into the coloured bit, the fun part. Okay. So I can touch that up again, and I can make it darker later and all those things. Again, I'm just going to pull the edges of the charcoal in around the eye again, just to soften off the edge of that and try and get it to look a bit rounder. And when we come back, I'll just show you quickly, when we come back later and put these hair around here, then that's going to, that'll help. Yeah, that'll sink the eye in a bit more. All right, so let's put the colour eyeball thing in, iris. And again, watch the shape of that. So it's not circular, and it takes up quite a lot of that space. It's on an angle. I'm putting my blue down first. I know I'm going to touch it up and change the colours. I think I've made it too big, but anyway. Fill all that in. You just want to get some colour on there, and then we can start to get other colours in there and blend it around a little bit. It's way too big, but I can go around the edges again and refine that. Just kind of tip some dust off. Okay. Now, the other colour I had picked up was this beautiful turquoise. So I'm going to pop some of that in as well. And the edge of the iris is much lighter, isn't it? So the colour is really in towards the middle and just under the pupil. And then the edge of it has that lovely golden sort of glow where the light's catching it. So I'm using my apricot again. So I'm trying not to pick up other colours out of my box. I'm trying to use everything that I chose earlier, just to try and keep it simple. And then we've got that colour on both sides. And then I'm just going to pull it around. So again, look at the direction of the eyeball and gently pull those colours around and around and around so that you're getting that lovely global feeling, I suppose, of the shape of it. Cool. I'm going to put a little bit more of the light just around the edge there. So it's all about the light. It's all about noticing where the light's coming from. And then as you put more colour down, you just press lighter and lighter so you're not blending it right in and making it all muddy again. So trying to create that lovely depth in the eye. Now around the edge of this pupil is a dark ring, isn't there? So I'm just going to use my charcoal to do that because it's easier. So I can get that through there and then sharpen up around the edges again to get the eye to sink back in so it's not going to pop out. It looks like it's popping out a bit, so it'll need a bit more work, but that's okay. Just need to make sure we get those colours right and the shape. What's happening at the base of the eye, I've just seen, is that the fur or the hair, you can't actually see the dark edge around the bottom of the eye. It's like the eyeliner is not on that bit. And so the hair's sort of almost coming right up to the iris. Just across the bottom there. I'm just putting some light in to show you what I'm talking about. See on there? So there's not really any black line here in between the iris and the skin around the bottom of the eye. So I've put this light in there just to indicate some fur right up against the bottom of the eye there. So it's just noticing all those little things. And it kind of comes all the way around to the edge then, doesn't it? Out to here. And then it's quite light from there. Like that. So when we get back into the fur, that's going to help to, put the eye in where it's meant to be. Okay. Now we've got to look at the pupil or the black thing around there. So I'm just going to mark in that tear duct a little bit more. At the top of the eye, it's darker, isn't it? So you can see across the top, it's much thicker, that dark area, the dark line. So we can thicken that up and then pull your charcoal or pastel, whatever you're using for this part, across to create that little tear duct shape. Now we've got to look at the pupil. So I'm just going to lightly mark that in with charcoal because if it's not quite in the right spot, I can fix it fairly easily. And I can go over this with a black pastel just to darken it off even more when I'm ready. So I just want to mark in the shape, make sure I get that about right. So I've just noticed the angle's wrong. There we go, see? So I can just dab that with my finger and push it in and soften it off and hopefully be able to fix that up. So that's why I always go light to start. Okay, so I'm going to have another study of the picture here and notice the angle of this eye. It goes that way. Why? Because she's looking up, so her whole head's on an angle, so everything's got to kind of be on the same angle, hasn't it, to make sense? And the right-hand side of the pupil isn't completely straight. It's got a very slight little bow in it. And then the left side is more of a moon shape, isn't it? So it's much rounder. So like that. I feel like it should be a bit bigger. So I'm just going to keep checking my shape. I'll tip off some of my dust again. Checking the shape of that little pupil. What I'm going to do is pop a bit of that light in just to make myself feel a bit better, and then it might make more sense. No, not quite. Okay, so it needs more black in there. I'm going to go and grab a black pastel because I want to darken this off a lot. Because if I darken it off, then it's going to shine more on the coloured area. So I've just gone really black in there. That's looking stronger now. Flip that around. And then to balance that off, you need to add a bit more of the black around the outside as well. So the charcoal's not quite black enough for me. It might be enough for you. I quite like it nice and dark. It's hard to get in there with a big chunk of pastel into that little area. Notice also on the left side of this coloured part, it's a little darker because it's got shadow from the face. So all those tiny little things make a difference and will help to get this in perspective. So I'm just using charcoal again, what was the first thing I picked up, to get a bit of shadow across that area inside the pupil here, or the face, eye, sorry. You can play around with your colours. I've just picked up my blue again to put a bit more of that down. It's still not right, but we'll get there. Shadow, what can I use for shadow? Let's try the blue violet. There's a slight little line in there. I've exaggerated it a little, but it's in there and it sits just left of the pupil. So it's a little shadow mark. There we are, now it's coming. I knew it would get there eventually. Sometimes it takes a little bit more work. Okay. You might just want to dab that in. I don't want to blend it because I'm going to lose my definition, but I don't want to let it sit on the surface too much. I just want to push it in a little bit to soften off those marks. Of course, blenders are wonderful things if you have one of those. They come in really handy just to get into those little areas where your fingers are too chunky. And now I'll probably need to go around and tidy up the edge of this guy again. So see how the shadow on that left side just changes everything. It kind of sinks the eye back into the eye socket. Now around the base of the eye, it's still not quite sinking away yet. So I'm just going to shadow that off a little bit in here. So it's really just about playing with your tones. I've got charcoal back in my hand and just having a bit of a, putting a line down and then checking it like they say about Santa, checking it twice and all that jazz. Grabbed a pencil. And so, as I said earlier, pencils are awesome for getting into your finer areas and defining different sections. So just check the details. Just keep looking at the eye, noticing, you know, how big different parts of it are, where the colours are. If you want to add some, you know, a bit more dark around the outside of the iris, and then a bit more dark around the top of the eye. So as I said earlier, it's a little bit thicker there. The eye lining of the eye. Sitting flat is so different to being on an easel. Okay, so I feel like that's starting to look a little bit more like it needs to. Just notice this is probably just a slightly wrong angle there. It needs to come up on the right there. So if you've got beautiful limey greens or yellows or something like that, you can add those in. You can make this eye any colour you want, really. Up to you, isn't it? I feel like I need to change the angle of the bottom of it a bit into there. So you can kind of keep correcting things until it looks right. So I just thought my iris was slightly off as far as the angle goes. I need to get it to look like it's going up into the eye, but also that she's looking up. Getting better. There's also a bit of shadow on the top of the iris there, so I don't know if you can see it. I think purple might be a good option for the shadow. I'm going to try it. I'm just feeling like it's a little bit too grey in here. I'll pop a bit of a shadow across there. So there's shadow falling from the eyelid onto the eye itself. And so that's being cast across the top. Can you see that across there? Might need to go a tad darker, just across in here. So this is all the layering, you know, getting the colour down first and then layering over the top, the shadow colours, and then darker again around the edges to get that nice defined shape of the eye. It's all just slowly building up, isn't it? It takes a while. And if I grab, I feel like I want to put more yellow or something in the eye. I might go for a bright green. So this is where you can break all the rules that we made before and put different colours in. Just to see what happens, right? Why not? Isn't that pretty? So don't be afraid to try other things. Yeah. And again, keep darkening off the pupil. So mine keeps losing its darkness. I'm putting more colour around it, and there's dust and stuff gathering everywhere. Tip that off again. And then just for fun, to make myself feel better, I'm going to pop the little shine on there. I know I say save that for last, but it's nice to get it in at some point to make you feel better. And Might have to come back in later and fiddle around with a little bit of that, but for now that will be fine, and we can maybe move on to other areas. So what I've done now, I've just picked up my brown because I noticed there's a little bit of brown just inside the eye here, and as it comes down onto the nose from the tear duct area, see that dark section there? Thought I'd try brown and see what that does. Might be a bit too dull, but just thought I'll see what happens when I put that on there. Could warm it up a little bit. Grey is always a bit dead, so it's nice to have a bit of warmth. So again, I'm just going to start to patch around. Yeah, I like the brown. It's quite nice. The eye's still looking a little too cartoony, but anyway, I can come back and sort that later. So now I'm just going to start to block in some of this brown, so not really blocking in, just putting some patches of it down where I can see those mid-tones. So where you've already put your dark sections or dark bits, you could start to patch some brown around. You might not want to use brown, you might prefer another colour if you have something more ginger, if you want a more gingery coloured cat. What I'm doing though is I'm using the pastel on its side. This is quite a large stump actually, it's probably a bit too big, and just rubbing it around. So I'm not drawing every single little hair. We don't want to get into that just yet. So by pulling it across like this, it's starting to get a nice feeling of hair because we've got that beautiful base already. Oops, let's put that on my eye. That's very clever. Because we've got a nice base built up, I can start to just pull the pastel around on its side, but in the direction of the hair, and it gets this nice furry kind of effect. Sounds a bit scratchy, I know. So, but I'm just trying to build that up, build all that fur up, get it lovely and thick and fluffy and gorgeous. So can you see how that's starting to happen? So this is a long stick, it's making kind of long marks or lines. I've got to be careful about which direction I'm pulling it in. But it's definitely starting to give it that lovely fluffy look. So we're going to do that with this colour or whatever you're using, your dark to mid colour, and then again with the other mids, just to start building up a beautiful texture. So I'm literally just pulling it around. If you start using the tip of your pastel and doing all those separate little hairs, you'll be there for a year and a week. But if you do it this way, just get nice, loose, big marks. If you're someone who does a lot of animals, you might have your own method or style, and that's cool. Whatever works for you. I guess the goal for my classes is to try and make sure we get as close to finished as possible each week. So, of course, you know, you can spend the rest of the day working on this and getting it perfect. But I just want to give you a really good start and possibly the option to walk away at the end of this and feel like you've completed something. All right, so I've got some browns on there. I'm going to just have a look at the nose actually and put some colour in there because that's quite lovely. Now, the nose colour is similar to my paper colour. It's a very similar tone, so I can't tell them apart easily. So what I'm going to have to do is lighten up the edge of the nose where it meets the colour of my paper, and that will work out because that's where the light's coming from anyhow. So I've just put my brown colour in there and pull that down into the base of the nose. Because we already drew it in earlier, I've got a bit of a black mark there already, so it's giving it a nice feeling of depth or texture. So I've got a nice little brown nose. Now, this is when you want to check your shape. So just got to make sure that the right shape going on here. Probably want to get rid of the edge of that because it looks like it's gone too wide. So I'm just going to go over that bit with some grey, a lighter grey. So it's really easy to fix things up if you've gone too big or too small or something. You can just kind of block it in again. Okay. Now I've got my black pencil. If you don't have a black pencil, just use a bit of charcoal or a black pastel if you can find an edge to use. And I'm going around the edge of the little nose here. So can you see between the nose and the fur is like a little black line, and that's because it's curling away from us and it's creating a little shadow just on that in this right hand shoulder of the nose. And then I can just gently pull that across with the pad of my finger and soften off that line. So hopefully it'll start to look like it's got some, what do you call it, form. Okay. And then as it goes away from us, off on into the paper, it kind of pokes out a little bit, doesn't it? Just onto the page there. So I need to lighten that section up just on the edge because that's where the light's catching it. And we want to be able to see the edge of it against your paper colour. If your paper colour is lighter or darker than the nose, then you won't have a problem with that. All right. I'm just going to get my charcoal again and vary the shape of this. So the edge of it, I missed the angle there. See, there's a little angle coming down. Comes down on an angle there. I made him too big. Easy to do. So you can patch that up. Just use the colour that's going to be around it on the nose. So I've just used my little grey. I've got my light grey and then I've got a dark grey. So I can play around with those. I can see there's a little shadow on the top right of the nose where the fur is. It's a little darker in there. So I can just patch that up with a bit of darker grey. And then play around with my lighter grey. And then if you wanted to, you could go back in, you know, around the edge of the nose, right on the tip where the light's catching the fur. You could brighten that up a little bit more if you wanted. And kind of just gently pull that colour across into the rest of the fur so that you've got this lovely gradual sort of turn on the bridge of the nose coming across the face. And then up on the brow there. And see that there's the other eye. I don't know if you can see the eyebrow of the other eye far off there in the distance. It's a little bit like that back here. Kind of just wanders away softly. So I've got a little bump there where that is. And to just keep it there, we still want to suggest that it's there, but we don't want to emphasize it too much. So I'm just going to blur that off a little bit. That's what I can see in the picture. It's just this little blurred off section. It kind of goes light there, just there, and then it softens off. So if you pull the pastel out towards your paper, you just soften that edge off a little bit so it looks all soft and furry. And there's some very, very light little whiskers there too. So I'm just going to get a pencil and put a few of those in. So this is a yellow pencil, just because it was right next to me. But I'll put a few little soft wispy bits in there, just so that they're far away in the distance. So I haven't pressed very hard. They're really gentle. I just want them to stay away, back over there and not dominate. And then when I come forward up onto the forehead here, we can do some, you know, brighter light sections that sort of tell me that that's a rounding around on the forehead. of the cat. It should have a little bit more of an arc there. So we can do these lovely, soft, fluffy little marks up there. See how that's kind of helping to catch the light a little. And then back in under there. That goes down through there. So it's always checking, just checking all these lines. I'm going to pop a bit more light in around the eye. I've abandoned the nose, I know. I need to get back in there and finish that off. Get the nostril and stuff in there. But you get distracted. I pick up a light and think, oh, I'll put a bit of that there and a bit of that there, and then I'll wander off somewhere and forget about what I started. It's not going to go away though. It'll still be here when I come back. But I really like playing with the lights and just watching how everything starts to come alive when you put them down, and the direction of the light and all of that. So I'll keep running around with this one now because I'm excited about how it's starting to look. And again, I've just got the pastel on its side. So this is my little square one, beautiful pastels these. They're called Blue Earth. And I bought the orange set and just all those beautiful earthy browns and apricots and stuff. So by just rubbing that really lightly across the page, it's starting to get a nice furry kind of effect. We can come in at the end and highlight a few of the hairs and let them kind of pop up. And that's, you know, you don't need to have every single hair on there. You can if you want to, but it's not completely necessary. So that's kind of fun how that's all starting to come together. Now I'm under the chin and I'm just sort of pulling the edges out a little bit with the pastel because I just want to get that lovely furry feeling under the chin there. And then on the little cheek, I think my chin's gone a bit too wide. Never mind. And then around where the whiskers come out, so it's quite white right on the very edge there, isn't it? Where the light's catching the cheek under the nose. So I'm putting my apricot there. Still haven't used any white. And then over on the other side. So we can always come in and lighten up with white at the end. And again, I'm just noticing the light parts and trying to get some of those beautiful tones in there to highlight the light. And then down on the little chest there, so a bit of light in there. So that's coming along. And again, if you pull the pastel in the direction of the hair, so for instance, if you've got a short piece, you can just kind of pull it around in that direction and it will start to look like hair. Okay. Now I'm going to pick up my blue. My blue is not quite as light as that apricot colour, but it's not dark either. And I just want to use that in the sort of light areas, but not where it's super light. And that will start to give me some really nice mid-tones. So not where it's darkest, but where I can see just a mid kind of colour. Now I know the cat's not blue, but this is art, so we can do whatever we like, really. If you're a realist, you might prefer to just use the colours that you see. But you can always, you know, try different things. It doesn't hurt to try different things. And if you don't succeed, you can just chuck some water on here with the brush, wash it all in, and then use your paper again. I did that the other day, actually. The one we did last week, I did a little sample. You know, we washed it in with some water and a brush, and I reused the paper, and it's awesome. Get some beautiful colours. So see how the blue just gives me that other tone that I was looking for? It not too light, but it's a nice light to mid. So that's sort of like the little hairs and the ears over on the right side there. That'll be good for there, because it's not the lightest, but it's enough to build up my tones. And so I can keep kind of going over this and building it and building it. Getting under the mouth here because it's not quite that light all the way down. And around where the whiskers sit. And then on the little nose, it's got a shine on there. I haven't put the nostril in yet. There's a little shine on there. It's not as white as the shine in the eye, so maybe the blue would be bright enough. I want to try that. If not, we can always change it. Better put the nostril in. It's looking a bit strange otherwise. And just picked up a black pastel for that one. So note the shape. It's a very definite little shape there, and it comes around so we can still see some of the nose coming down the side of the face, and then it comes around. It's like a little keyhole almost. I've got to be careful not to make this nostril bigger than what it really is. It's tricky when you've got a stumpy bit of pastel and a chunky hand in the way, isn't it, to see what you're doing. So I'm cheating. I've picked up a pencil again. There we go. And then I can just darken off, again, darken off around the edges of the nose there. Pencils are great because you can press hard to get a hard line, but you can also just press lightly to kind of start to blend the colours together. So they work really nicely to push the colour around on the page as well. Because the pencils are harder than pastels, so to get the colour down, you've got to press a bit harder. But then if you don't want to put too much down and you just want to get some very gentle shading down, you don't have to press very hard at all. So they're quite good for that. So that's looking okay. I think the cheeks, I've got them a little too light. I might just pop back in there with a bit of grey, dark to mid grey. So see how we're just running around this now and building up the tones. All about the tones. So make sure you remember which colour is which tone, and then that'll help you decide where to put it. So for instance, at the back of the eye here, it's a little darker, isn't it? And then right on the bottom of the right-hand side of the eye, I've got that lovely light fur where the light's catching it. I dropped my brown pastel on my eyeball before, so now I've got brown stripes in there as well. So again, just kind of pulling the darker colour around over what we've done before. See how that's just building up the layers? So she's getting lovely and thick now. So it's not just one layer, it's not just one sweep of colour that you do with pastels. It's kind of lots and lots of layers, and you've got to go through the ugly stage before you can get to the good bits, sadly. And sometimes we stay in the ugly stage way too long, and then you get disheartened and hate what you've done. Know that feeling. Just getting a bit of shadow and tone in there, and of course you can always add more light if you need to. You know, if you lose your light, you can add a bit more. Just be careful that you don't fill your paper up too fast, because it does get to a point where you can't get any more on, and that's when you either call it quits or throw it out. No, don't throw it out. Just wash it off. I'm going to pop the little freckly bits onto the cheeks now. Now I know these go in some sort of pattern, don't they? They go in a row. We better do that, otherwise I'm not going to look right. I'm just using my dark brown what I can do is, if I want to get a bit more tone or shadow in there, I'll come back in with some of my blue violet and just touch up a couple of these spots to get some shadow. And as those dots get closer into the side of the face or the front of the picture, they get less obvious, don't they? Okay, I'm just going to dab those with my finger and push them in a little bit. So this part of the face, we've got much shorter little hairs in there, haven't we? And then we've got longer hair, you know, around the back of the head and on the neck. So take note of that as well, because that's important for working out your markings. And when you're putting your little bits of hair onto the cheeks here, you just want to do short little movements, little tiny little short strokes, because they're short little hair. So I'm just kind of doing these little dashy kind of marks on there over those dots, because I don't want those to be super obvious. And if you look at the picture, the hair actually grows sort of over the dots anyway, and they're not that strong. And so I'm going to go back and forth with these dots a little bit. I've got my blue violet now. I know this is much darker than what I just used, but once I push it in, it's going to give me a nice feeling of shadow. And you don't want too much of it. Blue violet's a very strong colour. If I pat them in, just pat them like that, then it kind of softens them off a bit more. And then I can again come back over with my light pastel and do those short little hairs here and there, just using the side of the pastel. So I'm not doing every single tiny little hair. I'm just doing wider marks, but pulling them in that direction so that they're starting to hopefully look like little short hair. And then underneath. Cool. And now I'm just going to run around with this light one and brighten up some of those light spots, because when I went over them again with my blues and greys, they kind of got a bit lost. So once you start getting towards the end, you want to start highlighting the light sections, and that's what's going to give your cat form. It's what's going to, you know, give it some fluffiness. Highlight all those little bits of bright. So around the top of the eye, we've got this lovely light fur. Remember to kind of draw it up in the direction that it's growing. So at the front of the eye, nearest the nose, it's shorter hair. And then as it gets back, it gets a little longer. So you can do longer marks and run in the direction that it grows. And you've got, as you come round the eyes, a couple little, just little light loose hairs up there that sort of waft around in this direction here from the eye out towards that back ear. Just a few little light hairs, and that's when you want to use the edge of your pastel. So if you've got a nice little sharp edge on it, you can just get a few little hairs in there. You don't have to do every single one, just suggest them. The human eye is amazing, and it will make things up, so we know what cats look like. And if you've got all the right tones and things in the right spots, you don't need every single little detail. You just need to suggest, and we'll see it. We always do. And then back up around here in front of this back ear, there's a lot of light hair there as well. So what I'm doing is I'm just pressing really lightly. I've got the edge of my pastel on the paper, and I'm just doing soft little hairy movements. So keeping my fingers really loose on the pastel. I'm not gripping it super tight, keeping it nice and loose, because I just want these lovely loose little hairs to be highlighted. So only a few, not every one. And just where you can see the light hair. I've gone a bit too wide there. If you go too light, just come back with your dark grey or your mid colour and soften it off. Easy. And then down here on the chest, there's a few little, it's a little bit blurry there, so you can't see as much detail there. And now we've got all this lovely soft fluffy stuff around the cheeks and under the chin where the light's catching it. And now if you want to, you can, if you're at nearly at the end, and we nearly are at the end, it's 11:45, so we're going to wind up in the next couple of minutes. And we'll have a show and tell and look at everyone's artwork in a couple of minutes. So we'll just finish off what you've got for now. If you're not finished, don't stress. It's okay. I'm not either, so it's obviously going to take me a little bit longer to get this one complete. Tidy up all my messes. But if you are ready to put some of your highlights in, so I'm going to do that. If you're not ready, that's cool. We don't have to do that, but I'm going to do it now just to see what it looks like. And I know I can come back in and clean things up a bit later. So in the background here, in the far background, see those little whiskers that wander off onto your paper? So they're off to the left. They're the back whiskers, and they're very light, but they're kind of blurred. They're not strong, bright white like the ones that are in the foreground. Just taking off some of this grid. So what I'm going to do is use my grey, my mid to light grey colour, because those whiskers back there are not that dark. And so I just want to suggest them lightly. And instead of using the end of my pastel to get a sharp mark, because it might be a bit too sharp, I'm just going to, again, drop it on the paper, so a little stick like this, and just pull it softly, lightly, and just gently. You don't want too much. It might even be a bit too much. But we just want to have those really soft off in the distance like that, because they're not in the front, they're further away, so they've got to be softer. If I want to soften them off, I should probably clean my finger first. I could soften them off and just dab them into the paper and let them kind of be there in the background, but not super obvious. I know they look obvious now because we haven't done the front ones, but once we do these ones here in the white, those ones will just kind of disappear a little bit. So I'm going to get my white pastel, make sure it's nice and clean. So if you've got a bit of paper towel nearby, or I've got a little hand towel next to me here on the table, so I can just wipe it off and get a nice white section. And what we want to do is put these white whiskers in. So I'm going to use the edge of the pastel. So this is not dropping it down and being soft. This is using the edge, or a pencil, okay? So if you've got pencils, it's probably a better option. And think about this. So we're going to start here and then push down, and as you get to the end of the whisker, lift up, because see how they kind of all get a bit light and soft at the end? So we don't want a sharp ending. We want a soft, light, wispy kind of end. So let me try one. I'm going to push down and then pull it across and then lift off. And see how that just sort of wandered off into the distance, that end. So I don't want, you know, a line that goes like that. It's got to have a wispy end. I'll have to get that off later. Okay, so just do another one. So hold it down, pull and lift. And just note the direction of the whiskers. You might want it some crisscross over each other. You might want to wipe your pastel off in between swipes, because what will happen is as you do this, you'll pick up colour from the paper. And if you want to start fresh with a nice white whisker, then you'll need a nice clean pastel. So by doing that, I'm just getting these little whiskers on here. And see how now they come forward. They are more dominant than the ones off in the background because they're brighter. And you could do a couple a bit brighter. So to do that, oops, just press harder. And you can get a whiter mark. So it's a bit nerve-wracking when you're not used to doing that sort of thing. And also tricky to get off too, you know, if you wanted to fix it. Not impossible, you can. You've got to redo a few bits and bobs. So he needs a bit more work, she, whoever this is. I'm going to pop a bit of light. See back there, there's a little bit of light on that far brow. It's just soft. I'm just using the pastel on its side to get a little light back in there. And then I can pop a bit of my white. So now I'm starting to add my really light bits. Now you don't want to put those everywhere because then it'll kind of saturate everything else. So you just want to keep it to a few spots. Don't overdo it. This little cheek on the left is quite bright, isn't it? So that's where the light's catching. So I'm going to pop a bit of my white in there. Now I haven't filled the whole thing with white. I've just put a bit over what was already there. So what we're trying to do is just tell someone where the light's coming from and give it some texture. And so that's working okay. Now have a look around. Where else is there super bright hair? And just above the eye here, and remember that little bit of eye on the right there at the bottom coming out. That's super bright there. I'm pressing pretty hard in that section just to get that nice and light. So see how by adding the white at the end, we get this really beautiful little bit of a glow going on where you can see the light. And it just makes all the other colours sort of become mid-tones or darks, and they wander off into the fur and make it all look a little bit thicker and more lush. Okay. And so don't forget, you can use your pastel on its side just to get really soft little marks. So for instance, down the edge of the nose here, I know it's not super bright white on the top of there, but there's a little bit of light. So I'm just literally dabbing the side of my pastel there. So I'm not getting a hard line. It's just a soft line, but it's just enough to give that edge a little tiny glow. And then we've got those little eyebrow hairs up here, haven't we? So again, with your white, just fling them up, a couple of those up like that, and that'll give you those eyebrows. And I reckon it's just about it. There's a bit more work to do, but she's near enough to finished. So when you're finishing her off, just keep your mark nice and light. Don't press too hard and go gently. The eye needs a little bit more work. You'll have to finish it off later. So we're going to do show and tell in a sec and have a look and see how everyone went. It's my favourite part. I like to see what's been happening. The most frustrating part too with the online thing, because I can't kind of come around and check out what you're doing. So, and you don't have to do the show and tell thing if you don't want to, but it does make for a great screen grab. It's really good for Facebook. All right, I think that looks okay. So I'm just going to wait a couple of seconds. I'm going to take a photo of all this that's going on here, and then I'll flip over to the group share thing and see you there. And in the meantime, I'm going to stop recording now because that will make a nice ending. Cool.